So I kept this hand on the play. It's not super good, but I think it's better than a mulligan. We have some early plays, and if we don't hit our third land, we can find it with the Knight or the Wayfarers. So we're not really at risk at getting mana screwed, even though we only have 2 lands, but we are potentially at risk of getting run over um, by, some hand like a combo deck or whatever, because we're not really doing a lot or playing a lot of pressure, but we have action, so I did not mulligan it. Looks like we're up against humans. This deck's been kind of taking off lately. I was trying to just play 2 Wayfarers because I figure, no sense getting rid of the Knight at this point. Freebooter takes our Secure. And that's about the perfect time to draw a ley line. And obviously being sarcastic. I play the Thalia. Okay, so things are getting a little out of hand at this point. I don't know that Ballista is going to be enough to get us back in. This is where I'm kind of regretting keeping this hand. I had to deal with the Lieutenant there before it gets out of hand. We just kind of have to get lucky, and didn't really get there. Just trade with Athalia so we can cast our O-Ring if we draw a land. We didn't draw a land. Now we need to deal with this champion, but I have to risk them drawing a human so I can get a free chump block off it. I do chump block, and then I sacrifice, and oh, they did draw a 3-mana creature. So they would have put it into play on our turn if they had it, or in response to the Ballista, so they obviously drew it. It was a risk we had to take. So we play O-Ring, get rid of one of the threats, but now, we're not going to be able to beat the 3-drop either. And then we're just dead because the Nykthos comes in play tapped, and they're just going to attack us. We're going to chump block and take 4 and go to 3, and then we have no outs in our deck. So that was maybe a hand I should have mulliganed. Not really sure. I thought it was pretty close, but against the opponent's hand and against this deck, it's certainly not going to get there. So in this matchup, we want to bring in the 4 Wrath of Gods. That's our best card. And as I said in the deck tech, I think specifically because of this matchup, since they have Meddling Mage, we probably should have 2 Wraths and 2 Day of Judgment. So I bring in those 4 cards. Also, I bring in the 2 Devout Lightcasters. It only hits Freebooter, but I think that's fine that it only hits Freebooter. I think it's better than the alternatives, which are Nevermore and Leyline of Sanctity, because Leyline is only good against Freebooter as well. And I think I'd rather have the Lightcaster than the Leyline. Because, look at this spot right here. If we just cast the Lightcaster, we kill the Freebooter and get our Secure back. And then next turn we can get 3, 4, 5, 5 Devotion, 6, so we can secure for 5 next turn, which would actually, potentially get us out of this situation. Whereas just drawing a Leyline off the top is pretty horrid. So I made that change, even though Lightcaster's not great in the matchup. I think it's better than Nevermore or Leyline. But Wrath of God is the big upgrade. So now game 2 on the play, we have double Wrath, which is pretty good. Unless they Meddling Mage us off of Wrath, this will get there. So we lead with the Border Post, as is customary with this deck. They don't have the Vial. Play a Humid pre-combat, so we take 3. Now here we have a decision. Do we want to secure to prevent some damage, or do we want to save it for after the Wrath? And they played Mantis Rider, which means we're about to take 9 damage, and we could prevent 6. So I decided to basically use Secure the Waste to gain 6 life. So now we get to untap and cast Wrath. They're probably going to reload here, as they do, because their whole deck is just creatures. So I decide it's time to just Wrath again, because I think that our hand is pretty good against, the remaining 2 to 3 cards. And at this point, we're just going to play Ballista and shoot down their champion whenever they play a creature in response. So yeah, we just shoot it in response, and then I shot the opponent for 1, and then I let them Fiend Hunter it, because I think the 1 damage off the Ballista is not as important as leaving an out to the Fiend Hunter. So, of course, if the Fiend Hunter dies, then the Ballista comes back as a 0/0, and then state-based effects check, and the Ballista dies. But I decided that since I'm about to play Gideon, there's a chance that I'm going to have a Gideon emblem on the board. And then if the Fiend Hunter dies or leaves the battlefield when I have a Gideon emblem, the Ballista comes back as a 1/1 because of the emblem, and it doesn't die to the state-based effects. And so then I might have a quarantine field and be able to get some devotion and just start pumping the Ballista from a 0/0 position. So even though that's not super likely to happen, we have the Gideon and the quarantine field in our hand, so that is, it's going to happen, I don't know, what, 5% of the time or something maybe, and I feel like the percentage of the time that extra 1 damage is going to be relevant to the opponent is like less than that 5% or whatever the number is. So that's kind of a thing that a lot of people might not think about, but this is kind of using some foresight to think a few turns ahead to make a play that might seem a little unorthodox. And I know if this were a feature match in a tournament, they probably would have been like, well, that was weird. Does he realize it'll come back as a 0/0? But if you're thinking a couple turns ahead, that's the explanation for why to do that. And I feel like it's right to do it the way I did it. So anyway, we play Gideon, make a creature. We're in a pretty good spot now. Looks like they have something. Reflector Mage, alright, not bad. So you get to bounce our token, get an attack in on the Gideon. Gideon goes to 3. Untap. I was going to exile some stuff with the quarantine field, but I guess Elspeth is a better plan. Yeah, and the opponent's just like, alright, that's it, I'm done. So I made 3 tokens and attacked with Gideon, and I attacked with Gideon not because I felt like getting the 5 damage in was especially important at this point. It was more to get it outside of range of a top-deck Mantis Rider, because the Mantis Rider could attack Gideon to death if I don't do this. Whereas if I attack with the Gideon, then they can only Mantis Rider it down to 1, and then I can untap and quarantine field all their stuff, and still have both my Planeswalkers. So that was my reasoning for attacking with Gideon that turn. So yeah, that game went pretty well. We just wrathed them twice and then played some Planeswalkers and still had all these quarantine fields. So now game 3. On the draw, this hand is a little slow, and it's a little susceptible to a freebooter. It's like if they freeboot or Meddling Mage on Wrath of God, then that's this hand could really just fall apart. But we have a lot of outs to that. We have like Path to Exile. If it's a freebooter, we have another Wrath. We have Ballista, where we could shoot down whichever one it is. So we have an Oblivion Ring too, and we could just draw more, creatures and stuff to interact with them. So given that we have 4 lands, including the Nykthos, we have the Wrath, I felt like this is not a hand that we can mulligan. Can't really mulligan a hand with Wrath and lands in this matchup. Not as good as the last one, though, for sure. So they keep a Landlight hand, so this Knight is not going to get online, so we'll just cast it. Because I feel like getting the Devotion on the board is more important since they're missing land drops. Alright, Thalia, that buys them an extra turn. So the Wrath isn't happening till turn 5 now. And here come all their creatures. If you keep a one-lander, you definitely have creatures in hand. So, alright, well, can't cast anything. All we've drawn so far is lands. So we're going to take a big, massive hit here. Hopefully it's not lethal. Nope, just the Mantis Rider. Does not want to trade Thalia for Knight. Well, here you go. Here's nothing. Wrath you. What do you have on end step? Nothing! You have no more creatures. Okay, well, you drew a champion, and now Gideon. Let's start making creatures. See what you draw. Now you're drawing the lands. Okay. Just go ahead and emblem the Gideon so you can play another one. Get an attack in. Now we'll start playing our creatures. And that's it. So we're threatening lethal next turn, actually, with a 6/6 Gideon and 8 power worth of other creatures. That's actually, we're not. We're 3 short. But at this point, the writing's kind of on the wall, I guess. And kind of like the previous game, when we had Quarantine Field, we still have all these Oblivion Rings. But yeah, we kind of had our backs against the wall. If they had a freebooter to take our Wrath, we were just super dead. Fortunately, they did not have that. This is kind of the way the matchup goes. I think if we're able to Wrath them, we're able to get ahead, and if we can double Wrath them, we're very far ahead. And then like game 1, when we don't have Wraths, we really have to maybe start out with a ley line, get some devotion pretty quick, and resolve a planeswalker or something like that. Elishnorn is super good against them if we can resolve that. But yeah, it's certainly a favorable matchup post board. If there's a lot of humans and affinity and like collected company stuff like that in your metagame, you might even consider playing the Wrath of God's main deck over something like Nevermore. Because those are especially good in these creature matchups. But the way I see the metagame right now, I feel like the Wrath of Gods are a better sideboard card in this deck. But this matchup for sure are one of the matchups where we want them the most. So that's 5-color humans.